Yeah, even now he sulks like Achilles in his tent. Achilles? It's the Iliad?
Dun 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 dun.
It's Homer! Read a book!
Did you read any books this week?
I read part of a book this week, and I read a whole book a couple weeks ago.
Oh, and you want to talk about both of those? Why don't you very briefly get into your books?
Okay.
And then I'll go ahead and talk about mine.
Okay. So my first book is a Star Trek book called Rock and a Hard Place, which is by Peter David. I picked this up because I wanted to read New Frontier, and I heard that was it Lieutenant? I think it's Lieutenant. Commander Stone.
Well, yeah, remember because didn't he tell me he was like filling in for Riker? He was like the first officer.
Yes.
Yeah, so he'd be full commander. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Commander Stone is sort of a precursor to.
Riggs? No.
Sorry. No, it's sort of a precursor to the captain, to Mackenzie.
Yeah, that's right. And he's supposed to be based sort of on.
And people are like, well, they're kind of. It seems like these are the same character, or you're just kind of recycling this character. And Peter David said, well, they're not, but interestingly, they're both based on Mel Gibson characters.
That's right. That's right.
Mackenzie is based on Braveheart, and Commander Stone is based on Martin Riggs. And I was like, well, there's a Star Trek book with Martin Riggs in it. I gotta go read that. And it's kind of good and kind of bad. Commander Stone is a fascinating character. The problem is you spend most of the book... You should mention when
this came out, because this is one of the old numbered Star Trek novels.
Star Trek book, Star Trek Next Generation.
This would have been
number 10.
Like what, 88, 89? I think didn't we say this came out like during season 3?
Yes, because this is early enough that
90.
Crusher's talking about being gone for a year. So this is early
just after
3.
Pulaski leaves.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you meet Commander Stone, and he's a really fascinating character, and he's got scars all over his body, which is really unusual because you shouldn't have that in, this with all the technology. Like, you can heal that, you can get rid of that.
Dermal regenerators.
He's got scars all over his body, and every time someone sees that, he tells them a different story, kind of like the Joker, but in a really calculated way where each thing he says is playing to their base instincts, like, it's very romantic to Crusher, whereas to Wesley, it's I think it's I want to say it's like a private school kind of a thing, and like he tells Worf something different. While all this is happening, Riker is kind of having an adventure where nothing's happening until the climax of the book. This is a story that feels like it's missing a second act because you introduce Commander Stone. And then the story ends. And like most of this is introduction, and it feels like you don't ever actually get to live with this character living with all of the other characters. I would describe it like if you know Lethal Weapon, if you had the movie up to Riggs talking down the jumper, and then the drug lords kidnap Murtaugh's daughter, and like just the point where they actually have to live together doesn't exist. They're introduced. And then the climax happens, and then it's over. I enjoyed reading it.
Would you say the wolves are like a stand-in for the helicopters?
Yeah. Actually, yeah, sure. That works. They're genetically engineered. Riker goes to an ice planet because he's from Alaska, and so he's perfectly suited. He meets some people that he knew when he was a kid.
Oh, okay.
They're there, and that's why
he said it was kind of a dull B story.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like he didn't want to write a story about Riker. He wanted to write this other story, but he had to write the Riker story. So, like, nothing happens, and then they're gone, and then there's these genetic wolves, and, like... it's a fun read. It's not a great read. It's fine.
It's fine. It's my review. Whatever.
Yeah. On the other hand, I am reading Wicked City. I am about 110 pages into Wicked City. Wicked City is one of my favorite anime movies of all time. It's a really perverse, weird, dark thing. And I wanted to read the book. So let's talk about it here. Yeah, and I wanted to read the book, which is written by...
It's a great place for that sort of thing.
Hideyuki Kikuchi, who I like his work a lot. He writes Vampire D books. I also have another novel by him called Demon City Shinjuku. Wicked City is kind of like Men in Black, except demons.
Okay.
So they are the secret police that kind of govern the demon population, and they have a treaty with the demons, and every
Have your demons spayed or neutered help control the demon population.
yeah, exactly. They have a treaty, and every time this is not a contrived, generic cliched like every 1,000 years this happens. They have a treaty, and every time they negotiate a treaty, it can be longer or shorter. Like it's a peace treaty with the demons.
Okay.
So a peace treaty is going to be signed, and this is going to be an insanely long. It's like a 10,000-year peace treaty or something like that. Like it's the longest one ever. And there's this guy who's been at all of the other peace treaty signings. He's like a sorcerer who's existed for hundreds of thousands of years, and he's really important, and so he has to be there. And the main character Taki, who is a human blackguard, and then Maki, who is a female demon blackguard, they're put on protecting this guy. This book's really weird. It's insanely twisted. It's one of the most disturbing things I've ever read. There are rules that we have to horror that this does not abide by. Usually at least in film, we differentiate specifically nudity and sexuality from violence and horror. Unless you're doing something more psychological, that's more like serious. In a kind of trashy throwaway thing like this, like even in Cabin in the Woods, like the scene where the Power Ranger and Thor are together in the woods, you see her shirt open, but the second she gets stabbed, her shirt is closed.
Right.
Not buttoned back up, but closed, because there can't be nudity.
This is violence now.
This doesn't care. If I could sum this book up in one sentence, or one phrase would be sex and violence, and it oscillates between the two insanely.
And is it reveling in it? Is it? Would you
It's
call
completely
it
reveling
gratuitous? Is that would
Yes.
that be a word? Okay.
I would call it pornographic on both sides, like the sex and the violence. It's insane.
How's the prose?
Not great,
Okay.
but it's translated novel. It's
Okay.
not
Fair
bad,
enough.
so it
But
makes
it probably reads better in the original.
and it makes
language.
choices that I think might be more common. Like the prose asks me questions, which is a thing that the Vampire D novels do as well. Where like it's just prose that's like what is the man looking for? Something like that's a really bad example, but like it's something like that where it'll ask me a question like almost like, do you get it? Do you get what you should be asking about this scene? I'm sure that plays fine in Japanese prose. In English, it's a little weird.
Yeah.
So I'm 110 pages in. Page 104 has the single most disturbing thing I've ever read ever in it.
Ever.
It's really weird.
You're not gonna read it. are you?
No. This is.
No.
I will be talking about some of the stuff in this on our next After Dark episode. And you'll get to see Cap squirm and freak out.
Okay. All right. Get ready, folks.
Because this book's insane. My biggest critique is, so far, it is just action scenes. It is... Guy gets attacked.
It's like there's no downtime.
There's no downtime, and it's
discussion.
just... There's not like an impetus. Like, we're just moving and people are attacking us. We get on a train and people attack us. We go to a hotel and people attack us.
Also, it's a beat-em-up game.
Yeah, it's exactly a beat-em-up game, but I don't know, 110. I'm 110 pages into this book.
That looks like a fast read.
Yeah. I'm reading it on my break. I'm reading like 5-10 pages a day because I only read on my break. But a plot has to happen somewhere. Within it can't just be like sex and violence. Like there has to be a little bit more to it. Because the D novels are not like that. I mean, the D novels are far more reserved than this. But they have plots. They have other characters that do things. It's insane. I'm enjoying it, but it is a very different... I love Wicked City, the anime, because it's really trashy and really risque and kind of on the borderline of what's acceptable and
Clearly this is that.
and good taste. It's different in prose.
Yeah.
The sexual stuff is different in prose because you're reading words and you're not just seeing like kind of images that are censored or... Because... I mean, the movie doesn't go any further than any live-action film would. I mean, it does, but you don't see anything more than you would see in a live-action film. You don't have that in prose. Now, I do understand that in the 80s we were a little bit more... Because before I read this, the most disturbing thing I'd ever read was a scene in Wild Cards 2, in the second Wild Cards book. the 80s were a different time, and so I'm trying to keep that in mind.
Eventually.
Have fun.
I know that's gonna be rough.
I really like them, but have fun. Particularly with the Fortunato stories. It's a weird read. I'm not sure if I'm old enough to be reading this book, to be perfectly honest. But
that's probably a compliment to the author. He would probably be giddy.
Even if you like the movie, I would say know what you're getting yourself into. This is far more explicit.
Like that's even worse.
Yeah, it's far more explicit than the film. Wow. Like I said, this is pornographic in certain ways, in certain levels. So if you want to know the kinds of things I'm talking about, go contribute to our Patreon, and I'm going to talk about some of the really weird stuff that happens in this book on our next After Dark. So
I'm going to try to truncate that, make it as short as humanly possible.
But you also read the book.
Okay, my turn. No, I have more. No, it's my turn.
I'm not going to keep checking in on this, but I'll probably talk about it when I finish it.
Okay, all right. Well,
I'm not just going to show up next week and be like, and I read more of that weird book, and it continues to be weird.
Everybody tired of Star Trek books? Everybody sick of Star Trek books?
Not in this house.
Let's talk about some more Star Trek books. So let's talk about more not good Star Trek. And when I say that, I just mean these guys are stuck with not good material. This is Star Trek Enterprise: The Good That Men Do. This is written by Andy Mangels and Michael A. Martin. One thing that is strange about this book is that it's a duo, and it kind of feels like they maybe wrote different portions, because there's bits where I kind of feel like one is sort of explaining, or where something is being explained that has been explained already in the book, and the only thing I can come up with to justify that is that guy didn't read the other guy. I don't know if that's what's going on. But,
yeah, usually when you work like that, you at least read each other and edit each other.
Yeah, it's weird. I will get into the premise of this in a second, but one of the things that really distracts me about the prose in this book is, first of all, it's way too long. There is not 450 pages worth of story in this book, and that's how long it is. There's a bunch of places where it feels like, because it's in a different character's head now and we have that new POV, it has to explain things to you that you know already because you're with a new character now, and I think that's weird. And it just pads the book out. So anyway, that's kind of I'm starting with criticisms, but I was just thinking about the fact that these are two guys, and I think that maybe is part of why the book is this long, but I have no idea. Anyway,
but the other Star Trek book you read was about this long. This is a problem, I think, with licensed
more
books.
happens in it. These scenes are just really padded out. There's a whole B-plot that has no business being as lengthy as it is. So here's the premise of this and the reason I bought it in the first place. You don't know about the finale of Enterprise, but I will set this up.
Well, you've told me about it.
I've told you a little bit about it, but I will set it up here for folks that aren't familiar, to try to get them to steer far, far away from it. And
Enterprise is this book.
Why Enterprise? That last episode of Enterprise. The reason that this book, in a lot of ways, probably shouldn't exist, and the Enterprise relaunch probably shouldn't exist, is because things were so convoluted in that show, and we aimed from the very beginning from such a counterintuitive place that there is not enough to work with. You're just gonna keep kind of like beating a dead horse. Which is what I feel like I'm doing every time I talk about Enterprise. It's just, there's no way to fully make Enterprise feel like it fits with the rest of Star Trek. It can't happen, and these are desperate to keep doing that. So what we end up with in Season 4 is Manny Coto, again, kind of desperate in taking over and showrunning Enterprise to make this show that started from this really weird time travel place that felt like it maybe was a sequel that took place in the past. And by the way, I have read some of the Enterprise portion now of the reference book that came out last year.
Oh, the 50-year journey.
Yeah. I couldn't remember the name of the second one, the next 25 years. That is an oral history of Star Trek. I read the first like 20 or 30 pages of that, and Brandon Braga comes right out and says, yeah, it's maybe a sequel that takes place in the past. Like they were talking like that. Apparently, the time travel thing ends up happening in Enterprise because like a lot of the things that don't work in that show, it ends up being a studio mandate. They want some kind of future thing, and so they're forced with time travel in their their prequel. Yeah, and they didn't want to do transporters that early. They're forced to have transporters.
Interesting.
Yeah, to Berman and Braga's credit, I guess, they wanted to do more of the pioneering, trying to get up to Star Trek stuff. And there are other people, producers and people that are, and actors even, that are interviewed that say, well, mostly producers and writers, that say those two were the only people that could have fought for what they wanted, so we don't think they fought hard enough. They could have maybe gotten that stuff. Mm-hmm. They were sort of forced to make the show anyway. Braga wanted to leave. He was already trying to work on another show, and was asked back and kind of reluctantly came back, it seems like. But anyway, I want to talk about that at some point,
It's interesting that so much of the just conceptual wrongness about that show is forced upon them to begin with. It's not them. That's interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, some of it's not. There's no reason the Klingons had to have foreheads. There's no reason they had to have Klingons at all. But anyway, I will talk more about that when I finish that. I would love to talk more about that, but I'm just going to knock this out because we've got other things to get to, and this is a super long first omnibus. But we're covering a lot of stuff. Whatever. Yeah. Hope you guys are enjoying it. We're having a good time. Anyway, so that's going to be the show. We're just going to be really leisurely and talk about the stuff we want to talk about. So. This is going to be so frustrating to not just do this. I will say that before we did the omnibus, I tried to make a video about this book and I just could not get through it. So I will make this as brief as I can. Here's what this book does. It tries to retcon the dumbness of the last episode. That's what it's about.
Isn't the last episode, like, entirely a holodeck?
It is.
Okay.
And that's why they're able to do that, because they say history got it wrong.
Oh.
Yeah, because what the last episode is Riker, it goes back to Pegasus, and it has Riker, in trying to figure out his moral dilemma, go on the holodeck and ask Enterprise characters what to go do with himself. That's what the finale of Enterprise is. And they have this whole... this whole goofy story where we are 6 years ahead. We are at the right before the signing of the Federation Charter in 2161, and Shran shows up. There's this hackneyed rescue plot where he needs Archer to help him go rescue his daughter from these pirate guys. And in the middle of all of this, Trip Tucker ends up getting killed in the absolute most preposterous and contrived way you've ever seen anybody get killed off in anything. Seriously, just take my word for it. So this makes it a conspiracy, and says that Trip did not actually die there, and that the events that it is dramatizing actually happened in 2155 and not 2161, and it all conveniently takes place just 1 week after the penultimate episode of Enterprise, where Archer makes the best Archer speech he makes. Archer's terrible at making speeches. This book comes right out and says Archer's really bad at making speeches. That's really funny, and it's all about the trying to put together a coalition of planets that will eventually become the Federation. And after this big xenophobic thing spearheaded by RoboCop on the moon. And so that's what happens. So we already had RoboCop as bad guy, who has pretty much the same motivations he does in Darkness. And anyway, so
part of the same organization.
So this is trying to set up the Romulan War, with the Human Romulan War.
Which those books exist, and you have them.
Yes.
Well, you have the first one.
I have the first one, yeah. And like I said, this was kind of the beginning of the relaunch, although there is one book before this that is technically actually the beginning of the relaunch. It's weird, because I was like, well, this is basically like your first episode of Season 5. Why would there be a book before it? Apparently, it goes back to Season 3 and dramatizes like some interpersonal conflict between the humans and the Makos, the military guys, at the beginning of the Xindi War, and tries to flesh that out. But apparently, the end of that sets this up in some way. So that's what they did with that. Whatever. Anyway, so Trip Tucker apparently gets picked up by Section 31 and is sent to... They set up Section 31 also in Season 4 Enterprise. They're precedent for that. And he's sent to go spy on the Romulans. And he has to fake his own death in order to leave the ship and get sent in, so that he's not discovered and stuff, because it's easier if everybody thinks he's dead. And what it has a difficult time convincing me of, and I don't know how you would do this, I mean, like, this is nothing against these guys, I just think this premise is impossible, is why exactly it was necessary. Like, I get the faking your own death thing. It's nuts that it's as contrived as it is, because it's the exact same scene. It's just they this time they made it up, and there are characters that are involved and know about it. Conveniently, they make T'Pol not one of them, so they can do relationship drama with that, which is annoying. There's no reason she shouldn't know about it. And anyway, so he fakes his own death. They can't convince me of why they suspiciously set it 6 years later. I don't know why they do that. Why don't the history books just show him as dying when he apparently died? Wouldn't that make it way more suspicious if you looked at that? But they have to do it that way because they're stuck with this material and they don't want to have to keep writing to the last episode of Enterprise. And what's kind of nice about the stupid holodeck thing is it's the most retcon possible, because what you were seeing
is a recreation,
so it's potentially unreliable. So it's kind of a fun idea.
That is an easy way out.
It is an easy way out, and that allows them to do this relaunch thing where they can do a season 5 and have these characters wherever they want to, and they don't have to keep writing to that stupid episode. So I like that, and it's funny because they say that Shran never had a daughter, and there's a rescue plot with Shran that's really long and boring, where he's going after this Anar chick that that he falls in love with, who was in the Anar episodes in season 4. The Anar are all these these telepathic albino versions of the Andorians that are forced as slave labor for the Romulans in order to pilot these drone ships that they need their telepathy for in order to pilot the drone ships.
Okay.
That's this whole season 4 thing that apparently is the big precursor to the Romulan, the Human Romulan War. Okay, whatever. Okay. So this is how we're setting up the Human Romulan War. So
did you know that when you read it? Like, did you read this intentionally because
I did not know
you bought
that.
the Human Romulan
I just knew.
Okay.
I just knew that this book was saying that episode is stupid and it didn't happen that way.
Okay.
And I thought it would be cool to see what and it was a conspiracy thing.
Okay.
So I know what you're thinking, Eric. You're thinking, well, wait a minute, how could he go undercover with the Romulans when we're not supposed to know what they look like? Well, I'll tell you, Eric.
Okay. I thought you already said they just did away with the view screen thing and it's just different.
Well, no, they did that, but they keep contriving reasons that the humans don't know what the Romulans look like.
It's like Mary Jane, there's just like a big flower in front of her face.
Yeah, they have to.
Then...
No, the Romulans are concealing their identity.
They've got like the googly eyes with the mustache and the nose.
There's an idea in this that sort of works at least with... So you saw the pilot of Enterprise, you know there's all this animosity with the Vulcans and the humans. They're worried that Section 31... I'm trying to remember if they know. Actually, no, they don't know, which is weird. I don't actually buy that. I feel like their intel would be better than that. But anyway, the Vulcans that do know about it are because I guess there's a couple, are worried that if... it ever got out that the Romulans and Vulcans are distant cousins, that it would destroy the coalition because people would be worried the Vulcans are too much like the Romulans, and that's an okay idea. I don't mind that. But anyway, so Section 31 sets it up so that Trip Tucker goes to this species of these like bird-like avian creatures, aliens that are kind of cool sounding, looking. I can't read it. Cool sounding. Who they know what the Romulans look like, and they surgically alter him to look like a Romulan. But it's really weird that Section 31 trusts that their intel is good, and they know for sure that they look like that, and then why wouldn't they then, like, go look at him and see what he looks like? Yeah, it's really... I mean, I know I keep saying contrived, but that's what it is. So they do the best they can with it. I really expected, though, a little bit... I expected more from this story. Like, it's too much of a setup book. It's kind of just a setup novel. It's more than bookended with Jake and Nog way in their future, and
watching all of this on a holodeck.
No, they find this information somehow and are reading about it.
Oh,
I don't like somehow they find out about it, and I thought there would be some kind of like. Future story that like where they did something with that intel. We check in with them every now and again for no good reason. I would think it would just be bookended. We keep going back to them as if they're going to have more of a story, and they don't. And then there's a big, giant swath of like 150, 200 pages where they don't show up at all, and I kind of forget about them. And then when they show up at the end, I'm like, this is a bookend. We should have never gone back to them. That was really strange. If you really liked Enterprise, you'll really like this book because it's very authentic to Enterprise. That's the problem with it. Like I feel like this is what Enterprise would do with this material. It just further complicates the whole Romulan, humans not knowing what they look like
until it breaks.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what they're doing. And it's kind of Enterprise level dialogue, a lot of it, and it acts like the intrigue is way smarter than it is, and it holds your hand all the way where it just over-explains everything, and that kind of drives me nuts. Anyway, I've talked about this too long, but I had to sit through I had to read this whole slog of a book, so I thought I'd tell you about it. I was disappointed with this because I thought it could have been more fun of a premise. There are things in it I like. Trip Tucker is likable enough. I kind of sort of end up buying him as a Romulan agent. I'm surprised I end up buying that as much as I do. And there's this great list that Nog or Jake have at the end that really cracks me up, where it's Nog, where he just starts going down a laundry list of plot holes from the last episode, like why things. I'll read you some of this. Let me, yeah, here we go. This new take on Archer-era history holds together for me a lot better than the standard version does. You know, with Captain Archer's whole command crew not receiving a single promotion. Yeah, 6 years, no one's promoted? Really? This is hilarious. He just reviews that episode. It's great. Even after having served together for 10 years? Or Archer's dog somehow not having aged a day during the entire time? Or Archer's famous big speech at the Stick, which makes a lot more sense now in the context of the post-Corridon. Oh, I forgot to mention that. This has this whole thing where it tries to explain why the Corridons are almost involved in the creation of the Federation and then why they're not. That's this whole convoluted mess in Season 4, where it seems like they're going to be part of the Charter, but you know that in Journey to Babel, that's what that whole episode's about, is their admission to the Federation. Yeah, the Romulans kind of decimate them and kill 2 billion of their people, and they decide that they don't want to be part of the Coalition anymore. Instead of, I don't want to play with you guys anymore, I get beat up! Instead of, being part of the Coalition so they can help you with that, I don't know. Which makes a lot more sense now in the context of the post-Corridonic disaster era than it does in the post-Earth Romulan wartime frame, where most of the histories place it, or the pirate ship that could barely manage Warp 2 somehow catching up to Enterprise, which had to be traveling at nearly Warp 5. And anyway, it's that whole thing was hilarious. I'm done talking about that. I honestly, I want to apologize for talking about that as long as I did.
I can talk more about Wicked City if you like.
No, it's cool. Yeah. Anyway, Enterprise is obscene in a totally other sort of way. Okay, so that is going to be it for Read a Book, and now we encourage everybody, as always, to read a book. And now on the Omnibus, we're going to
read, or we'll all die.
Well, kids, that's all you get. That's it. Read a book.